Hello, everybody, and welcome to another great webinar from Reuters Events. This one is brought to you by EXL. We are here to talk about how we transform the future of insurance with AI-driven solutions. And if the title of this webinar wasn't a key to it, this is part of the build-up to the Future of Insurance conference that is coming up June 22nd to 24th from Reuters Events. You can check out the emails you will get for more information on that, but it's worth attending. I am Bryan Falchuk. I'm your moderator today. I'm the managing partner of Insurance Evolution Partners and the author of the book series, The Future of Insurance from Disruption to Evolution. And the next book in the series is coming out at that Future of Insurance event as well. So watch for that. This conversation today is really about this interesting spot we're in from a data and AI and analytics tool set standpoint, where we have all this legacy data and legacy tools, and they've worked for a lot of years, but we've maybe run up against some roadblocks and some difficulties with them. And we have all these new ways of engaging with data and new modalities and methodologies and solutions coming out. But often we find ourselves stuck where we can't give up what we've had because we're really dependent on it. And we can't not embrace newer ways of doing things because the value that we can achieve from that, whether it's efficiency, better underwriting results, loss ratios, customer experience, et cetera, is really quite significant. So how do you navigate that? We have a really rich discussion on that theme today with a mix of people across the spectrum. So let me share with you who our panel is, and then we're going to jump into some opening thoughts. What I want you as the audience to do is think about, as you're listening to these opening comments, what are you curious about? What do you want to hear from this panel? And pop it in the Q&A right at the bottom of your screen in Zoom. You have a little Q&A button. Put your questions there, not in the chat, right in the Q&A, and we will get to as many as we can. So let me introduce our panel, and then we're going to jump right into some thoughts from everybody. First, I have Aleem Lakhani, who is the EVP for AmTrust North America for their Specialty Risk Solutions Division. We have Calum McPhail, who's the head of liability claims for Zurich Insurance. Somya Bhadola, who's the practice director for Everest Group, and Ankor, who is the chief digital officer for EXL. I want to lead off with Aleem and hear some thoughts from you on this subject, this AI data quandary that we're in, where we need to make use of what we have and find a way to move ahead at the same time. Aleem, over to you.
Thank you very much, Bryan. And you accurately summarize the challenges that we all face. In our particular industry, specifically that AmTrust is involved in which I am particularly engaged with, is in providing protection programs, warranty programs, and product liability for the entire distribution channel. It's a $45 billion market in the United States, and when you add the manufacturer's warranty, it's over $70 billion. And the industry is facing a lot of pressure on the premium, as well as concurrent demands for growth. And so that necessarily leads to how can we optimize rates and how can we facilitate growth? And AI is a pivotal tool in that exercise for us. So from a rating perspective, if I narrow it down to a rudimentary two-variable analysis of frequency and severity to guide us through how we would rate, we recognize that there's the data that we have is only as good as the data we get through our partners, third-party administrators that are executing on this, and the sales channel. And that's a particularly big challenge in that how do we get the buy-in of all of these players and partners to be able to provide richer, more robust data, and to be able to demonstrate how we can use that data to improve both the rating and the premiums that we associate with them, as well as assist them with how they can execute so that the severity itself is in line with the nature of the risks that we are underwriting and the claims that are that follow from that. And so AI is a central tool, apart from the fact that we can enrich our ability to provide analytics of more robust data, both from a parametric and non-parametric perspective, is very key, as opposed to a reliance on very defined data sources and expectations of normal distribution. We can have more flexibility as more data comes in. We can evaluate it under different modeling assumptions. And secondly, is we recognize that there is an inherent amount of latency in the process. And so now with data, we're able to become much more dynamic. So from our side, what we're using AI applications for is not only to mine the data that we have, of which we have massive lakes of data, so that we can make assumptions when we're performing rating on different kinds of products, but we recognize that we need more data as product iterations are more frequent, new products are entering into the marketplace. And so now we have to develop more robust modeling methods to be able to make inferences of how those new devices are going to perform. And then ultimately, we recognize that a lot of the devices which are connected and have sensors embedded in it, how will the next iteration in our industry perform in harnessing the power of that data? Because the moment we bring that data on board, apart from using AI to calibrate rates much more effectively, when we have dynamic data, we can start getting into, instead of segmentation, we can get into personalization. And so we see the evolution of our industry sort of transforming significantly in that regard. And that will obviously bring about dynamic rates and more efficiency, more transparency, so more accountability in terms of the kind of rates that we're providing in the marketplace. It'll help partners with the ability to utilize AI technologies to bring operational efficiencies. And that's key to customer experience, which is ensuring that they are retained and we deliver more value, and really transform the model from being highly reactive to proactive so that we can engage with customers. You know, the old data point about I believe the average time between a connection between a customer or a policyholder and the insurer is north of 12 months, on average about 14 months. We want to demonstrate value in this entire exercise. And then finally is we can embrace new business models in our industry as well. So instead of just the subscription model itself, we're starting to see device as a service or product as a service, or different kinds of ownership models. And how do you develop insurance schemes that sync with that? And then finally, the other area that to facilitate the growth, in addition to just bringing them economics from rating exercise, the other is to be able to grow. And to grow is typically an expansion in markets. And we as a global carrier at AmTrust, we endeavor to provide programs that we can leverage for our partners in all the territories in which they apply. Well, that's a lot of complexity. Each jurisdiction has its own compliance regime, and it's constantly changing, and it's certainly highly restrictive. And so the challenge is that given that complexity, many partners will elect not to offer those complex products and stick to either more rudimentary products and develop a aftermarket strategy, which results in really less conversion. So what we focused on as well is developing applications using AI that can assist in the ability for partners to be able to sell in all their distribution channels and be able to validate the transaction in conformance with local jurisdictions, like sanctions checking or IPT applications, disclosure requirements, and be able to, with that veracity and traceability element, satisfy regulators so that we can continue to sell and grow business. So from that perspective, I think from our organization, we focused on, again, leveraging AI to enhance the quality of the rating methodology that we use. It's not just about lowering rates, it's about bringing insights and knowledge to our partners so that it powers them to think about what they need to do about their products and services. And then on the other hand is to be able to ensure that the way that they sell and where they sell is in conformity. And AI is a vital tool to be able to do that. But we're looking for the next generation when we can integrate IoT data into the mix, which will be a phenomenal period, but we'll have more challenges again with that.
Oh, that's a lot to take in that has already sparked great questions. So thank you for those points, Aleem. I had a question from that, which has not been asked yet, so I may sneak my own question in, but you made a lot of really interesting points about how AI can make up for a lot of these constraints and restrictions that are holding us back from maybe evolving the products underwriting better or getting closer to continuous underwriting, which maybe it, we still need IoT to get there, but really, really interesting. So thank you for those comments. Calum, I'd love to turn to you to hear some thoughts, your position running liability claims for Zurich. What's your take on the AI question and this kind of position we find ourselves in?
So thanks, Brian. I think just to be clear, I'm based in the UK, so this is very much from a UK perspective, in case there's Zurich people from North America wondering who I am. I think we are relatively new in terms of what we're trying to do with AI in the claims perspective. What I'm going to talk about a little bit is work that some of my property colleagues have been doing over the last year, working with an AI partner around automated policy checking in the property space for personal lines and also for commercial. And it's something, as I say, that's relatively new to us. We are starting to understand the scope of it. But basically what we've done is we've built a system that has been trained using data from something around 20,000 completed claims, data and documents. And what it's doing is providing automated cross-referencing with relevant decisions from those previous claims, understanding and tracing the relevant policy wordings, where there are specialist conditions or endorsements involved. And it's able to do that with something like 98% accuracy to be able to then place in front of the handler a recommendation for the next steps of whether coverage should be accepted. And in some simple cases, the pushing through to say recommending settlement straight away. So it's something that we've been really pleased with the progress. I think in claims we tend to be reasonably skeptical a lot of the time. But what we've seen here has really been quite impressive. It also has an active feed into, in the UK, we have the Financial Ombudsman Service, which for personal lines customers is a right of escalation if they're unhappy with an insurer decision. So it's an automatic cross-reference into that service for previous decisions on similar circumstances, so that what's placed in front of the handler is not just a do this, do that, but it also gives a rationale. And if the rationale is something along the lines of a question as to whether coverage is in place, it will provide the information that the handler requires to then perhaps ask further questions or to validate the decision. What we're finding, because certainly in the UK we have a wide range of policy wordings, particularly amongst our schemes, that it's driving fairly dramatic efficiencies in terms of time saving, accuracy, and so on. It's providing an intelligent triage of claims at drastically reduced timescales, and ultimately what it's providing is simplicity, accuracy, transparency, and ultimately an improved customer service, where we are able to have a really sensible and accurate conversation with our customer really quickly after notification of the claim. So that's one of the main things that we've started working on, and we see the opportunity to develop that into other areas of claims, into our liability, our motor and casualty spaces as well. To provide our handlers with the tools to have the better value add conversation with our customers. I think some of the other stuff that we're doing in terms of streamlining our processes, certainly in the liability and motor and casualty spaces with injuries, that we need to find a way of putting a value against those injuries. Habitually, that's been a reasonably manual process of putting details from medical reports into a tool to help with that. We are now using tools with natural language processing and able to automatically extract and populate the tools. It's giving us better accuracy. It's giving us better data insights out of the back end of that, and effectively helping us again to promote efficiency, but actually make sure that we're not suffering from human error. And at the moment, we're finding an 83% accuracy on the reading of the reports and the valuations coming out, which we've tested against experienced handlers doing the same kind of work. And across other parts of claims, we're doing a number of things. We have some older legacy systems that we're stitching together with robotic software to help streamline the processes for the handlers, all of it aimed at giving the handlers more time to make the value add decisions, to have the customer conversations, and to make sure that what we're doing is actually delivering for our key stakeholders.
As a former liability claims guy, this has me really, my interest really piqued, because it is hard to bring some of the tools that might be successful in property or maybe personal lines into the liability side or the professional line side. So to hear some of the ways they're using it, that's really interesting to me. Not to put down the progress made on the property side, that's also fantastic. But I feel like, this is the tricky bit. It's not, I always said, like, we weren't gonna have drones flying in and mediating our claims for us. So finding ways to bring some of the advanced technology in, even on something that's trickier, that's really exciting to hear. So thank you for that, Calum. Somya, if I could turn to you to hear some thoughts from your perspective at Everest.
Sure, thanks, Bryan. So when we really look at the insurance industry, I think it's a very well accepted fact that the industry is heavily data led. But if we really double click into it, what we find is the industry is actually document led. And insurance enterprises kind of process millions and millions of different document formats from multiple channels, from multiple stakeholders. And these documents are kind of at the crux of their ultimate decisions, whether it's about how much to price, whether to even take on the risk in the first place or not, how much to be paid in claims, etc. And in relation to this tremendous engine of document processing, what we have seen in recent times is increasing conversations and interest around a specific category of AI solution, which is around making that entire content extraction and document processing piece more automated as well as more intelligent. So when you talk about AI-led content extraction and many of the components of these solutions, they're not actually very new, but they are rather additive to what was being done in the industry before. So while earlier, most of it was kind of being done through OCR, you might have some of the RPA and bots in place, but these kind of had a very acute limitation of being rules-led, being very static in that sense, and they were really unable to work on your unstructured data. Now, if you consider these limitations and you really add it to the fact that majority of data that kind of insurers receive that gets used in your downstream decision-making processes, that's actually unstructured. So your emails, your PDF files, your APSs, attending physician statements, etc. So in that sense, you really start to hit a ceiling that was really low in terms of what could be automated in that entire content management strategy. And that's where we have seen intelligent content extraction really differing. So in its ability to use this technology called natural language processing, it understands the context and it can even work on unstructured data. So these AI solutions, typically they use a combination of your OCR, your RPA and other AI technologies, your NLP, machine learning, etc. And they kind of work together in an ecosystem and they create that end-to-end automation environment. And that's where in the past couple of years, we really have seen a very, very renewed and a very vigorous interest in these particular category of AI solutions, which is just about digitizing at source first, and then making sure that your downstream digitalization efforts and downstream investments into other AI solutions, they really get the data that they need. So I think that's one of the renewed interests that we have found, and I kind of wanted to point that out. I think additionally, the interest has, in these solutions, the interest hasn't just been because of the limitations that kind of previous technologies had and the insurers wanted to augment on those, but also the various kind of enablements that your AI-led content extraction solution creates. So just for an example, it would provision much more better quality of data that you could readily then use for your downstream decision making, whether it's your claims, whether it's your underwriting. There's just so much data that generally gets generated in the industry, but we realize that much of it is not even being used to understand several patterns, several behaviors. And with these solutions, that's what you can enable now. And that's one of the factors driving the interest. Again, if I talk from a data standpoint, it kind of enables the insurance enterprises to be much more effective in creating those digital data streams that could then be used to train your various AI solutions downstream. So for example, if I talk about a predictive analytical model, these models generally require a ton of data to get trained, to deliver value that's actually being expected from them. Creating that data environment in the first place is very important for these models to behave and deliver in the right manner as you expect from them, and get your intended ROI. So again, that's where plugging these solutions in your upstream digital intake kind of an environment becomes important. Third would be what we've also seen is from a workforce productivity angle. And when we consider the insurance industry, it's really very important for the insurance industry. And even if I add to the fact that the challenge of your near retirement workforce, I think that's something that the industry has been facing for quite some time now as well. So when you really consider how an underwriter or maybe a claims assessor is working, so a lot of their valuable time kind of goes in your document study or gathering all those relevant information, maybe doing a lot of to and fro because some of the information that was shared was not right. Then you can put in models to make your decisions, etc. But when you replace it with an intelligent document processing solution, so that's where a lot of time that these valuable professionals have been spending in those non-value additive activities, that gets freed, and that capacity kind of gets created for them, and it's very, very important for the insurance industry to be able to create that capacity, especially in the dearth of these talented professionals that are incoming. Another important point, and it's kind of related to the earlier point, would be in connection with the workforce enablement is the ability to attract the younger talent as well. So when people really think about insurance, and what we generally hear is the general sense is that somebody's kind of working with a pen and paper, and they're like surrounded by tons and tons of documents, and that doesn't just appeal to the tech savvy young folks, as we like to call them. And when you invest in such AI solutions and you kind of invest in decluttering your environment, making it more digital led, making it more efficient, making the roles and responsibilities more focused on the whole task at hand, which is more or less about your analytical decision making, that's when you could also attract this younger workforce, and this generation starts thinking about the industry differently, and that interest might also just start to rise. So lastly, I think it is creating much better efficiencies across your process chain. AI-based content extraction, it's not just about automating your data entry, but it's also about capturing all types of data. And I really like to stress on the word all here, because I think one of the problems that we've seen insurers struggle with is they're not able to rightly capture all the kinds of data. You would have limited workforce, you would have limited technology capacity to do it, etc. And there are a lot of limitations why you're not able to do it. And that's where capturing all data becomes really important. Being able to even authenticate and classify that data. So otherwise, somebody would be doing it manually, making those classifications, etc. And that's something that this solution can bring about too. And then naturally inserting that data into your downstream business applications, and those can be then consumed by your decision-making units. I think with COVID-19 recently, what we have heard a lot from the industry, and there has always been an interest around increasing your operational efficiencies. But with COVID-19, there's an ever more interest around operational efficiency, and especially through more and more straight through. People are trying to explore more and more automation opportunities across their value chain. Maybe even when even the agenda of when you are growing, you maybe do not want to spend in your talent growth as much as well. You want to grow, but then you want to keep a distance between how much additional people you hire. So that's something that you achieve by automating as much as possible again. So an AI-led, I think, content extraction solution is really a very relevant and crucial step that we are hearing. It's being explored in that regard. So I wanted to talk about that particular solution.
No, that's really valuable. I mean, you made a few points that were really, really tangible and implementable, and that's kind of this moment that we're in, right? Are we too held back? Can we do things? How do we do things? Using the resources that we have, the assets that we have, whether that's data or people. So, Somya, thank you for bringing up that point, because it is ultimately, a lot of it is about the people we have. And Ankor, I'm watching as everyone's talking, you're nodding, and you and I got to have a series of conversations around some of these points. And there's so much that we got into that I'm hearing echoed here today. And, Somya's points especially really hit on this sort of adjuster space of the future that you had thought about. And of course, we go back for years, and it was question after question. The Q&A is, when does my job go away? How much longer do I have before I'm forced out of work? And you paint a very different picture that I think hits on Somya's points. Is it's about your job being enriched and more rewarding. And if you really step back and maybe can remove some of the fear from that moment, which is understandable, you see there's a lot of things you have to do in your job that is not really what you get up in the morning hoping to do, right? And so how can these tools make the work more rewarding, attract new talent in, which is certainly going to be an issue for the industry, and bring a better result on the claim, on the underwriting, the loss ratios and the rates that we're able to charge, et cetera. So I've been excited to hear your views, because I know so much of this really touches on what you're working on. If you don't mind, love to hear your thoughts. And we have a great flow of questions coming in. Keep them coming. We'll get to as many as we can. So Ankor, over to you.
Thanks, Bryan. So yes, it was actually pretty interesting listening to Aleem, Calum, and Somya, because as we talked about AI, I think what more than AI, we actually talked about data and getting clean data available so that the AI could work. And at EXL, we've been helping our clients really operationalize these data-driven technologies of AI, analytics, and the cloud to help our clients create speed in customer experience. And you might ask, why speed? Efficiency makes sense, outcomes make sense, even improving the customer experience makes sense. Why are we focused on speed? And I'll talk about a few client stories that actually sort of articulate why really when clients are pursuing efficiency or outcomes in underwriting, it's really the pursuit of speed. So traditionally, insurance clients, and actually clients across industries, achieved efficiency or achieved better outcomes. So for example, you had an FNOL process, and what we did was there was a certain amount of labor that was doing it. We tried to reduce the cost of that labor. Or we tried to use robotics to automate an arm and a leg. In fact, what was really intriguing about those efficiency initiatives was we said, let's not harm the customer experience while doing this. Well, the insurtechs have totally changed that. As you see insurtechs and these really cloud native insurers, what they're doing is for the end customer, speed is synonymous with quality. What does that mean? If one carrier takes 30 days to process a claim and another takes 2 days, you automatically think 2 days is better. I want my claim in 2 days versus 30. Take a commercial new account process. If one carrier, the broker sends basically a proposal, and one carrier takes 2 weeks to reply to it, versus another is able to revert in 24 hours, we've actually found speed of coming back with a quote increases the likelihood of winning that by about 30 to 40%. That pursuit of speed has necessitated AI. And what we found is over 70% of these AI-driven implementations actually underdeliver when they're put into production. But in the lab, they work brilliantly. Why does that happen? And when we've explored that, it's because AI, unlike robotics, or unlike all the past interventions, can't just be inserted into the current state. You actually need to redesign the way you do things for AI to work. And we call that moving to the AI operating system. And Somya talked a little about that. What does the AI operating system mean? Really 4 things. AI has to be upstream, as close to the customer as you can get. In insurance, there are just 3 moments of truth. When you basically issue a new policy, when the customer files a claim, or when they're renewing or a payment and delay. And you've got to push AI as close to the customer because that's where it has the most impact. But most importantly, to Aleem's point, that's where it generates the most amount of real-time data so that those beautiful models can actually work on it. The second part is you've got to redesign your process. Now that you've got clean data, you don't need to ferry your process back and forth between where the experts are to where operations is, between 2 legacy technology applications. Data can carve its own path. So that's the second piece, redesign data with embedded analytics. And then you talked about this, Bryan. It's not about eliminating the human. It's actually about elevating the human so that humans start becoming AI coaches, doing the most complex part rather than having to do real sort of time-consuming manual work. I'll touch on one example that sort of brings this home. We were working with a life insurance company, and they had one objective. It took them more than 7 days to process a new policy, and they wanted to cut it down to at least a day or a couple of days. And when they looked at it, what they realized was the big reason was underwriters had to spend a lot of time going through these 150-page attending physician statements to try to extract certain variables that they needed for their models to decide what premium to offer. We built an AI solution that basically removed about 80% of this manual search effort that underwriters had to indulge in. And it extracted not just the 7 to 8 variables they were looking for, but actually over 100 new variables that they could potentially use. Again, to Aleem's point of more data means better decisions. And we housed it on AWS, on the cloud, and our underwriting, the clients, the underwriters actually consume this in a neat data warehouse. We provided them with this really cool interface where we have the variables, we show where the variables have been extracted from just to build trust because underwriters want to be sure these are big decisions they're making. And I'll talk about more stories as we go on, but even here, the reason AI worked was the pursuit of speed to improve customer experience. So I'll pause here and hand it back to you, Bryan.
These are great real world examples. I mean, several of you have shared actual numbers, actual examples, which is always a tricky thing to get in these webinars. So thank you for the specifics, because that's ultimately what people need to know where to start putting things into action. We have a lot of questions, so I want to try to get to as many of them as possible. So I'm going to dive right in. Ankor, thank you very much for those thoughts. So this question is setting up a bit of disappointment, perhaps, with some of the AI projects that have gone on, at least, in this person's experience. And I think we've all seen examples of this. I'm going to skip the setup and go right to the heart of the matter. He said, the disappointment of AI for me thus far has been a tendency to try and reinvent the wheel and taking 5 years to get where we already are, right? So the AI needs all this data and time to learn and be trained and get the accuracy up. Rather than starting from what we already know and seeking to refine and evolve matters from there. And this person's asking for comments on that. I'm wondering if any of you has had this sort of battle is, are we starting from scratch and clean sheeting it, and that therefore takes much more time? Or can we build from our current starting place and maybe get to impact much faster? Calum, if you don't mind, I'd love to start with you, because you had some specific results that you guys were seeing on the property side and in your business as well. So maybe you guys have some experience with, do you start from scratch, or do you enhance where you are today?
I think there's no doubt that you need to put a fair amount of effort and a massive amount of data in to be able to work like this. So I don't think there's any easy answers. Say we've probably done it over a period of maybe just slightly over 12 months to get through the data ingestion and the start of piloting and the system throwing out recommendations or results that are then sense checked by handlers. So I'm not sure it's starting with a clean sheet. I think you can't start with a clean sheet if you're trying to learn from what has been a correct foundation. what you're trying to do is enhance that. So you have to start from where you are and use what you already know or what you already have in the data banks. I think it's about there's no way that we could have done this in-house. We couldn't have done it without the use of an AI partner that was very agile and put a lot of time and effort into it. But we had to put a lot of time and effort ourselves. We had to take people away from the front end operationally to work with them. And that's a call, when we've had to do it internally as well. What some of the robotic solutions we now have, we've built an internal automation academy, and through gritted teeth, I've released frontline handlers who have now been trained in robotics, because actually they have a better understanding of our systems and processes to build these little solutions that here and there incrementally make small differences, but when you add them all together, smooth that entire journey. So I think there's definitely pain, if you want to call it, if you're operationally responsible for delivery, by handing away resource to that kind of project. But you definitely see the benefit as it flows through.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if I've answered the question.
No, but it's useful. And I know, Aleem, this sparked something for you. So I see that you raised your hand. I want to jump to you next to hear some thoughts on this as well.
Yeah, great question. First, I think, all the data that you accumulate, you don't toss away. That's gold. So notwithstanding a unsuccessful use case application, it's still valuable. We learn a lot from it. In my experience, it starts with a good strategic plan and then a good data plan as fundamental, so that you define realistic expectations and then you can execute. So just I think Somya spoke to a lot of the processes of, how to handle the data. And I think you need to invest heavily into that process. And it is an iterative process. We are going to fail, but we learn from it and we continue to improve. However, what I wanted to share as Calum was speaking was, we all work in our independent organizations, and maybe one of the opportunities is comparable to an experience that I have. And when I look at products, is we go through sometimes accelerated life testing. So, we take a device, or we take some properties of a device, if it's mechanical, electrical, electronic, and you accelerate the life cycle. So, in a short period in time, we've accumulated 5 years of experience. And it seems to me that one of the things, and we make that available as non-identifiable, but open source data sets, so that others who have comparable can take that data set and learn from it. And maybe one of the things that we can all benefit from, as we all are undertaking to become better AI application providers in our organizations, is, being able to bring that data, anonymize it in some form of a shared environment, so that we can get some standardization and normalization around what data points are available. And in some cases, some may have more, some may have less, and with all the privacy and other considerations, but use that as a mechanism to be able to mine that experience, so that if, for example, you've gone through 5 years of life cycle, you've been unsuccessful, you've got these environments where we can aggregate all of this data and you can leverage those pools of data. So your relative costs are down, but there's got to be a method by which, as we all are facing the same kind of problems, we're all trying to undertake the same kind of initiatives, and we all have our own ways to bring a unique competitive advantage in the way we do things, but the data is the data. And if we can leverage that data collectively in an environment so that we can benefit from it, it would seem to make a lot more sense than our individual challenges and the ROI limitations we might experience. Just a thought.
It's an interesting point that touches on another one of the questions that someone asked. So I'm going to come back to you on that one. So we will continue that line of thinking. Somya, Aleem mentioned one of your points. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, and this notion of, does it have to be this long drawn out build up, or can we start from where we are and enhance from there? And Calum and Aleem both speaking to sort of testing and building as you go.
So Brian, I think what we generally have been communicating in the industry is when people think about transformation, I think the general sense comes out to be, okay, this is going to be an ultimate overhaul of how I'm going to do business, but that's not actually what transformation really is. It is going to be an incremental journey. It is going to be an iterative journey. It's really very important to know where you are today. It's really important to understand what your inefficiencies are today, what your actual problem statements are today, and maybe incrementally work towards kind of resolving them. Maybe prioritize some of the problem statements first, and then move on to the more complex ones as well. So these are the approaches that we have found that have kind of worked best amongst the peers who have been able to transform well. Otherwise, if you try to undertake a project that's ultimately going to be an overhaul of how you're doing business today, what we have found is that generally people spend millions and millions of dollars and then they kind of end up with nothing. That's where we really want these journeys to be very informative. These journeys to be continuously monitored using the right set of KPIs, right set of metrics, people from different functions coming together and deciding kind of what would be the right step forward. Because generally what happens is your one department is working individually, but they're not really talking to other departments. And then somewhere upstream or downstream, it could create complexities and the value doesn't really come across. So it's really important for everybody to come together, understand where they are now, where they really want to go, create a roadmap towards it, and continuously monitor the progress that they're making. I think that's what we generally communicate as well.
Yeah, so I think there's alignment in what each of you is saying so far is building and going iteratively, working together. Calum, you talked about bringing resources into the engagement, even though that can be hard, and build from where you are. Ankor, you've been across many of these implementations. Does this all jive with your experience as well?
No, of course it jives with the experience. I think these are experts talking, so it makes sense. I wanted to add a different perspective. I think the question is also about how do we give AI a running start, right? Every AI initiative can't feel like we're starting with a first grade student and we've got to get them through 12 years of school. And I want to take a client story. So we had this P&C insurers. They had a first notification of loss process. And it was very manual. People called up, they gave some information, there were callbacks to get some more information before the claim could be set up. We built a conversational AI. And I think this question goes to the heart of how you operationalize that conversational AI. If that conversational AI had to go through 1 million conversations of the past to learn how to talk to a customer, the project failed before it started. Instead, the conversational AI, the input to it was not data. The input to it was existing process flows, because what the AI understood was how to interpret and operate on a process flow. So what it was doing was not learning grade 1 rules. It had grade 12 rules already created. It was learning if there was uncertainty or ambiguity in the middle of a process, what it should do. So as a result of that, what happened was we were able to get a running start and operationalize this in 90 to 120 days and start taking calls. The second step point, which goes to, I think, what everyone has said, is evolution. But how do you become Darwin? And the way we've done that is when the AI can't handle something, it automatically goes to a human, but the AI doesn't stop. It starts learning from the human. So the next time that call comes, it actually has a slightly rejigged process. So I think the key of giving AI a running start is it shouldn't have to learn from data. Can it learn from human ontologies, which are really process flows, and work off that?
I think you nailed that question, the intent of it, when you said that first grade versus fifth grade, or whatever 12th grade. I think that is really what they were getting at, is why are we starting as if it's the first day of school ever, when we've already been through years and years of that and learn from behavior. Really, really well said. Another question, and we have far more than we will ever get to, I know that, so let's jump right to the next one. Age-old debate in this industry, build or buy. Is that logic different in AI? Is it a much easier answer Calum, I'll start with you again. What do you think the answer is here? Or is there one?
Well, I think where we've seen success so far is working in partnership. And I don't think we would ever suggest that we would have had the skills in-house to do that ourselves. So I think purely from an AI solution, I think we've learned over the years that massive IT projects can be problematic, and we're taking bits, individual pieces at a time, and working with agile specialists. So I think from that point of view, it's to an extent by. But I think with some of our other things I think I've mentioned already, we've taken experienced handlers from within the organization and developed other skills for them to help feedback and that benefit.
Yeah, I mean, maybe there's something in the nature of, to the point Ankor was making before about, it's learning from experience. And if you have something you brought in from the outside that is gaining experience from across carriers and across lots of different behavior, could you ever build something, no matter how good your in-house skills are, to meet that ability to learn because of the breadth of experiences it gets to play off of? Ankor, is that the notion behind the buy idea in AI and ML in particular?
I think, as with most things, there's slight nuances to this. I think the question of build versus buy is actually a legacy question. The only question a client should be asking, or an insurer should be asking, is speed to market. What gets me fastest to speed to market? And that's not a smart way to say buy, because sometimes the amount of customization required for a buy solution handicaps you that you should be building. But the key criteria is speed to market. And what with the cloud, and I want to underline the cloud, with the cloud, the speed of integrating outside ecosystem pieces, making them reusable, is so simple that I think it's always going to be a build and buy answer. And what that means, I think Calum was going there, 70% of it can come from the ecosystem, and 30% of the configuring must be a build, so that it actually becomes something that you own. Very few ready-made suits work right off the rack. You need 30% customization to make it your own. And I think that's why the answer is build and buy. If you only do one of those, you're probably going to under-deliver on the impact that's possible.
That's solid advice. Aleem, does that mirror your sense of things as well, or have you had a different experience?
No, I share that. I believe in a hybrid approach. In addition to what Ankor has cited, which I totally agree with, is in addition to speed to market, I think you have to have in-house resources that are skilled in the technology, its application, and can work with these outside partners. So I definitely agree with a hybrid approach, but I also see the speed to market and the talent gap deficiency that we all talk about as a methodology by which we can start accumulating that skill set internally. So yes.
Speed, expertise, applicability, fit for purpose. Somya, you, and the next question I want to start with you. So I'm hitting you twice in a row right now, but you talked about a lot of different places in the total value chain or process chain where you can use some of these tools. Do you see this holding true, build versus buy, across the piece, or are there specific areas where maybe you're more likely to want to build versus buy, or vice versa? Or is it for you, is it also this sort of hybrid mentality across the board?
I would say that it's across the board. Sorry, was that for me?
No, sorry, that was for Somya. Just building on the point she's.
Okay,
no, but
sorry.
But that's good to know.
No. Go ahead.
Well.
Yeah, I think thanks Aleem for taking up the first part of my answer. Yeah, I think that's across the board that we have heard. I think whenever we've talked to insurers, and especially the tier one or the large insurers, the global insurers, but what we have heard is they don't really lack the resources to invest. So they have the resources to invest in something which is transformative for them. What has been their limitation is they don't really have access to the right talent, and they don't have access to the right experience. And it really starts from the leadership as well to your downstream managers and operation professionals and everybody. So I think that lack of experience and that lack of talent is something that a partner can plug in with the right solutions and with the right value propositions. That's what we have kind of heard when we have talked to especially the tier 1 carriers. And I think experience at the end of the day, how you're building that solution, what's the problem statement and how it really needs to be solved. I think that experience will come internally from the insurance professionals only. We have seen providers, third-party partners kind of coming in and studying in those their operations to identify what can be done better. And what that prevents is a narrow inside-out mindset. Sometimes what we've seen is insurers kind of just look at their own operations. They are not really aware of how the operations are being run at other firms that might be doing better in many senses. And that's where they lack that kind of a broad mindset. And that's that broad mindset or that outside-in mindset is something that a partner can bring in as well. But ultimately, it needs to be a co-innovation. Both the parties kind of need to be equally involved. What the process is, what the complexities are. Ultimately, I think the insurers professionals know that the best. So they need to be on board as well. They need to be involved as well. And then the partner will bring their own set of expertise in terms of the talent that they're bringing in, the technology solutions that they're bringing in, the experience that they have had in implementing such projects before. These are important as well. So this would be more of a co-innovation kind of an approach that we are hearing the industries moving towards.
So I think across everyone, Ankor's point that the build versus buy is an outdated mindset. I think that holds true, that it is this sort of, how do we do this co-developed or hybrid kind of approach. So Somya, I told you I was going to start with you for the next one as well, because it hits on things that you were bringing up in your opening comments. The question is, do you see AI playing a bigger part in downstream processes like claims settlement, which frankly is a lot of what we hear about when we talk about applicability, or in upstream initiatives like customer education and engagement to reduce claims in the first place or drive better acquisition? Do we see one more than the other? Is this an evolution thing where it's not ready yet to move into some of the more upstream processes? What's your experience or your sense of this?
It's difficult to say that it's one versus the other. I think both are very ripe opportunities for AI, whether it's about right decision making in your claims process or doing your claims process more efficiently, or whether it's about engaging your customers in a better manner by maybe making innovative products that are more IoT-led, AI-led, or maybe doing that entire risk assessment of the customer much more faster, much more fast-tracked manner, etc. So the opportunities exist in both spaces. We have seen momentum in both the areas. In fact, in more recent times, I think what we're seeing more momentum is around the new business acquisition side, the underwriting side, and how do you really engage with the consumer. If you really look at all the insurers, I mean, some or the other investment has really been made into that area to engage with the customers better, because that's the first experience that the customer gets with you, and that needs to be nailed down before you really reach a claims process. So I'll quote one insurer that we talked about. They clearly mentioned, if you're not able to engage a customer and you're not able to drive a top line, I won't really have a business to work my claims on. So I think that's how the industry is really looking at it from my standpoint, where our conversations have been.
Yeah, I think you're spot on. There's definitely activity in the customer acquisition space, especially. Calum, is that your experience as well, or is it able to move into from the downstream heavy applications into things like risk management or risk selection and other more upstream places?
Yeah, I think it can. I think data, where we understand what it's telling us, can provide unbelievably valuable insights that we can feed back in to other parts of the business, to our risk engineering partners, to our customers. I think there's a challenge about whether the customer automatically believes something where the machine says yes or the machine says no, and that applies equally within the claims framework or when we're talking more directly to the customer on other aspects. So I think, yes, there's definitely opportunity. I think it's about how we present it, and if it gives us more options to give the customer, then I think that's what we can ask for. There'll be different customer demographics that will accept the machine saying something, whereas others will want to understand the rationale from one of our people.
Yeah. Yeah, again, a different kind of hybrid approach then, really. Aleem, I want to put a twist on this for you, and it's not to say you can't answer it as it was if you'd like to, but you mentioned IoT, and particularly in the space that your business is in, when you think about warranties and equipment and products now, IoT can be even more valuable from an upstream standpoint, either for acquisition of the risk in the first place because you know something about it and you have access to a data stream to tap into it, or risk management to stop those losses preemptively. Is that how you see driving the upstream push, or are there other ways to do that even before IoT is more pervasive?
No, I think you're right. I mean, we're certainly using it for downstream purposes, but you're absolutely right. This provides highly personalized knowledge about consumer activities that you can apply more calculated risk models and behavioral risk models so that you can anticipate what it is. So yes, absolutely. I think you can certainly balance your portfolio of risk much better. You can identify where risk behaviors may be more problematic and whether you need to offer different kinds of coverages and what kinds of coverages, and ensure that the consumer is protected as well as yourself. But absolutely, I see IoT being relevant throughout that entire warranty value chain, from acquisition of the customer, the type of customer, all the way down to our ability to be highly preemptive and preventative with particular kinds of actions, or highly precise to mitigate fraud that happens in the downstream process. So everything is a learning experience that you want to channel upwards. And so yes, and I think the other thing is that risk is not necessarily a function of an individual, or of that product. It's potentially of many people. So if it's in a home environment, you have a group of 4 or 5 people. And so you have to be able to extract particular kinds of behaviors that commensurate with that situation, as opposed to just at the point of sale and an individual and the qualities that might be associated with that particular transaction. So absolutely see the relevancy in the upstream as well.
Yeah, no, it's a great point. Risk is a multivariate issue. It's not just down to the reductionist kind of, it's just this one thing. Thank you for that. Ankor, I'm going to, just in the interest of time, you're going to get the last word. I'd love your take on this, again, because you see so many different implementations, different applications. I'm sure you're seeing the upstream and the downstream and have a feel for that balance, if there is one, or if it's not about one or the other. It's you look across the piece and see where it's most valuable for your business. I'd love your perspective on this to close us out.
I think when we think about AI, what AI is really doing is it's producing clean data for everything that's behind it in the enterprise. So if that is the definition of AI, the real benefit comes by pushing it as close to the customer as you can, right? And therefore, I think when we think about upstream or downstream, really the goal is, if you can place the AI as close to the customer, what's going to happen is the customer experience is going to improve, but you're going to capture really clean data at the back end. So that means whether it be a new business process, have the AI next to the customer so that the unstructured data can be taken in. If it's an F&OL process, have the AI next to the customer so that the claim can be set up well. If it's a payment or billing process, let the customer hit the AI first so that it can proactively try to resolve what the customer is thinking about. If it's customer education, have them engage with an AI so that the AI engages when they're ready to. And it's not, dunning of emails, or every time they call up to set up a claim or with a query, you try to educate them. I think that's the key learning. The vision we always have is, if you place this AI upstream, you really get this clean water, clean data flowing through, and it's like this spring flowing down a mountain. It carves its own most efficient path, and you don't have puddles in the enterprise anymore. It's just a stream that flows, and that's what we sort of call the data flow. That'll be frictionless. That's how we tend to think about it, Bryan.
I think it's a really nice mentality to use towards it, and a great way to close things up. We got a ton of questions, actually. I think more than I've seen in recent webinars even. And even still, 2 more just came in at the last moment. One was, will we get a recording of this? Yes, you will. It will come to you by email. And the other was, I have to go, but thanks for the AI Jamboree. So people are appreciating it. So those are maybe not true questions, but good response nonetheless. Thank you. Fantastic discussion from really rich perspectives across this panel, and to the audience for sticking through the conversation and asking, honestly, some really hard-hitting questions. I wish we had more time to engage in them. This panel has some great thoughts on the subject of this really important moment we are in, balancing the AI around the data that we had and where we wish that data would go and what we can do as a result of that. So thank you, everybody, and have a great rest of your day.